Another economic update here from Professor Richard Wolff, this time in reference to the auto industry. I want you to listen to what Professor Wolff says about capitalism and the auto industry, and we are going to connect this to racism in the auto industry. Let's get to it.
The automobile industry, because it is such a statement about where we are in the United States today. Here's the basic story. The automobile industry has made a commitment to become a smaller industry, more profitable, but smaller. What do I mean? They're producing many fewer cars. They have no intention of selling the kinds of new cars that they used to. They are accommodating the change in America. The rich at the top who can and will be paying a lot of more money for a new car. And the rest of us, we are going to be living on used cars from now on. It's a split in the market. New for the rich, used for everybody else.
Let me chime in here just a second. He's 100% spot on. I've never had a brand new car. Not once. Every car that I have owned has been a used car. The car I have right now is, I think it's 2006 Hyundai. Yeah, I think it's 2006 Hyundai. Also, used. I did not buy it brand new. And the reality is this. I don't buy brand new cars because I can't afford to buy a brand new car. And number two, I don't buy brand new cars because I can't afford to have a high car payment monthly. My car is paid off, so me and Hyundai are going to ride this puppy on out as long as she lasts. But basically, the auto industry, they have decided we're just not going to make as many cars anymore. We're going to produce less. So now we're messing with supply and demand. We're going to shorten the supply. We're going to increase the prices. So we're basically making the newer cars for wealthy people, and everybody else, they can get the used cars. Interesting, huh? Let's go back in.
And boy, does it symbolize what's happening. But let me give you the numbers. The last 2 years, the 2 years of the pandemic that we were told, you were told, I was told, were years of difficulty and compromise, have been the most profitable in the last 10 for the automobile industry. You know about how the last year we've been hearing about a shortage of chips and supply chain disruptions. Don't believe it. What we have here is a classic move to reduce the supply of new cars and jack up the price. In the last year, we recorded the highest average price of an new automobile purchase in the United States, $48,000.
Raise your hand in the chat if you can afford to buy a $48,000 car. I can't. I don't think I've ever owned a car that cost more than $20,000, like, to be honest, but they're setting a bar here. They're setting a bar.
Since the end of 2019, that is before the pandemic hit, prices are up 30% for new cars. You get that? 30%. The production of new cars is way down 22%. So they cut the production, told us stories about chips, told us stories about supply chain disrupted. But what they were doing is classic elementary economics, cutting the supply, jacking up the price, and guess what? The profits went up. In other words, they got more of a benefit by raising the price than they lost.
This is something that we need to talk about as well. Some people may think, well, wouldn't that actually hurt the car dealerships if they decrease the supply? No, because they increase the price. So they actually made more money by decreasing the supply and increasing the price. Because here's the thing, the people who have the money to buy a $48,000 car, they're still going to buy one. The people who have the money to buy a brand new BMW, they're still going to buy one. You can look at someone like Jay Leno. Jay Leno has several cars, several cars. I remember seeing this when I was younger, when they went to Jay Leno's house and Jay Leno was showing off all his cars. So the people who have the money are going to pay for it regardless because they can afford to pay for it. And it goes the same way. I bring this up with the housing issue as well when we talk about gentrification. Same thing. Same thing. Because when it comes to gentrification, you say, well, why are people still paying that much in rent? Maybe if people stop paying that much in rent for an apartment, then the landlords will have to decrease the rent. The problem is the people who can afford to pay $3,000 a month in Boston for an apartment are still going to pay for it. That's the problem.
And that's why they did it. It was the most profitable strategy, which we know because it was the most profitable year for them. And as I believe I've told you more than once, the supply chain disruption nonsense was just cover to make it seem that it wasn't their decision to cut back production, but of course it was, to make more money by charging more, which of course is what they did. And the proof are the profits they now so glowingly show. But the bottom line, it's a decline of the American standard of living. Kiss the new car goodbye. You're not, between the price of it and the now higher interest rates that mean the monthly charge will be even bigger because the price is higher and the interest charge is higher. We're changing America, and if you didn't want to face it before, now the very car you're sitting in will be a constant reminder of what the reality of U.S. capitalism means to you and me right now.
Let's add something here that I want to point out. You also see this happen with food. You also see this happen with food. Because if you have more money, you can afford to shop at Whole Foods. You can afford to get organic vegetables and fruits all the time. You can afford to buy organic meat. You can afford to do that. You can buy the wild salmon instead of getting the farm-raised salmon. You can do that. So is it fair that people who are poor or people who are working class have to get stuck with the grocery store items that are not the best quality, that are not organic? Is it fair that they get stuck with the cheaper food, which is usually not healthy? And this is another thing I like to point out as well. If you go to the grocery store, all of the cheap foods are usually things that are not good for you. It's usually the processed foods. It's a bag of potato chips. It's a cheap box of cereal. But the food items that are healthy for you usually cost more money. And this is another thing, and we talked about this before in reference to food deserts. There are communities in the United States that have food deserts. They don't have a grocery store. So you have people that live in those towns and they're getting their groceries from places like Walgreens or Rite Aid. What's at Walgreens and Rite Aid? Is there healthy food at Walgreens? No, not at all. So basically, it's one big FU to poor people and to working class people. Think about that. Think about it. That was the end of that clip there. And I'm going to link this to racism in the auto industry as well. Now, I have two articles here. I'm just going to kind of shoot through both of these. But Nick, my comrade from RBN, he can testify to this because he used to work at a car dealership. He used to sell cars. So Nick has talked about this before as well. Even though there is this type of discrimination that he's talking about here in reference to the class issue, people who are wealthy versus people who are poor and working class, and the types of cars that they can purchase, right? There's also discrimination racially in the auto industry when it comes to interest rates and pricing for cars as well. Listen to this. Structural racism flourishes in the auto lending market. Now, this came out May of this year. And there's just one part here I want to highlight because people need to see this. Furthermore, the auto lending market is riddled with insidious discrimination and does not provide equal access to this essential product. According to a report by the National Consumer Law Center, auto financing companies charge Black consumers between $300 and $500 more in interest rate markups on their auto loans compared to white customers. So this was another thing that we noticed before when it comes to the auto industry, these car dealerships, they were charging, I don't know what, something was stuck on my hair. Okay. They were charging Black customers higher interest rates. Kid you not. Again, this was reported by the Consumer Law Center, National Consumer Law Center. They were charging them higher interest rates. Why? Let's go on. The same paper also reports that African American and Latinx consumers who purchased cars in person paid more than other consumers, and that 45% of the difference in price cannot be explained by income. Cannot be explained by income, education, and other traits. A study by the National Fair Housing Alliance found that 62.5% of the time, the studies test borrowers of color who were more qualified than their white counterparts received more costly pricing options from auto dealers, and that these borrowers would have paid $2,662 more over the life of their loan than the less qualified white testers. That is 100% racial. That's not class, because they did the comparison between those who were more qualified and those who were not as qualified. This has been a problem for a while. Someone mentioned, Roman mentioned credit ratings, but in the study, that's why they sampled also people who were more qualified. That includes the credit scores and people who were not. You see that? You see that? Let me go to the next article here, because there's another one where there was a settlement. There was a settlement for a car dealership doing this as well. Let's get into this one. Now listen to this. Car dealership agrees to $10 million settlement for allegedly charging Black clients more. A $10 million settlement, you guys. Now listen to this. An Illinois-based car dealership on Friday agreed to a record $10 million settlement with the Federal Trade Commission and the state's Attorney General's office for allegedly adding illegal fees and charging Black consumers more for financing during purchases. They were found guilty. A $10 million settlement. What does that tell you? What does that tell you? So it says Ed Napleton Automotive, headquartered in Oak Brook Terrace, agreed to a settlement on Friday after a complaint was filed against 9 dealerships in Illinois, Florida, Pennsylvania, and Missouri. Now that came from the Chicago Tribune. According to the newspaper, the settlement was filed jointly with a complaint in Chicago federal court. In a news release from the FTC, the complaint alleged that the dealership group charged thousands of customers, hundreds or thousands of dollars for add-on products such as payment insurance and paint protection without informed consent. You guys see this? So this was also announced on Twitter as well. FTC takes action against multi-state auto dealer Napleton for sneaking illegal junk fees onto bills and discriminating against Black consumers. Napleton Auto will pay a record-setting $10 million in the case brought jointly with the state of Illinois. Ouch. So as you can see, these things do happen. So with the auto industry, you have a class divide and you have a racial divide. So there you go. There you go. I'm going to go to some of the comments here. JB says cutting back production also equals layoffs and reduced hours for workers. That's true, 100%. Teddy G, my next car, shoe leather. JB says years ago, my mom got swindled into extremely high monthly payment. Blue Moon Red Wine is here. God, I got to work out our car lease. What a pain. That's right. JB says that's his local news station. I'll take that comment on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Sab, I want you and the family to not look at this Wolff clip as the glass half empty, but half full. This can encourage two things: a push for a national high-speed rail infrastructure, which can lead to national infrastructure bank realization as a way to maximize used by those who have to be in office. What it could also lead to is the encouragement of remote work for workers who don't have to be in the office. Well said, Roger. Well said.